Good morning, everybody. My name is Carl Gaffney. I work here with Avaya in Galway. I'm also on the AtlanTec Festival Organising Committee, and I'm on the AtlanTec board. I'd like to welcome you all today to today's talk. It's great to be back for our 7th year of the AtlanTec Festival, and this is our 2nd year running the event virtually due to the pandemic. So we very much hope that we'll all get back together again in person next year and have a different experience. But delighted to be able to welcome you all here today. Just a couple of logistical things before we jump into the presentation from ADAPT. So in the bottom right hand corner, you'll see just beside the chat there, you'll see a Q&A button there. So if you can please put your questions into the Q&A there, and at the end of the presentation, we'll get those questions to Ben and Justin. So please use that where you can. Just note that this event is being recorded, and so you can later in the week, we'll publish the recording if you want to play back and listen to this. And again, we'd just like you to, get on social media, promote the event for us at #AtlanTec or at AtlanTec Fest. Let's see if we can trend across social media today. So moving on to our presenters today. So a little bit about ADAPT. So ADAPT is based on voice-based. So basically, voice-based assistants have become prominent platforms for interaction, yet they're currently limited in how they interact with users, waiting for the user to take the lead, as it were. With this talk will focus on the work being conducted at the ADAPT Centre on making voice agents more proactive and how this can be transformative for the voice agent design, focusing on the opportunities of and interaction challenges involved in proactive agent interaction. So I'm delighted to welcome our two co-presenters today, Dr. Benjamin Cowan and Justin Edwards. So Ben is an assistant professor at the University of UCD Dublin and the Department of or the School of Information Communications. His research lies at the juncture between psychology, human-computer interaction, and computer science in investigating how theoretical perspectives in human communication can be applied to understand phenomenon in speech-based human-machine communication. He has published widely on user-centered issues in conversational and speech interface interaction, is co-founder of the International Conversational User Interface CUI conference series, and has been involved in a number of workshops on the topic of major international conferences. Dr. Cowan is also the co-founder and co-director of the HCI at UCI group, one of the largest university-based HCI research groups in Ireland, and is funded investor in the SSI-funded ADAPT Centre, which looks to develop and design cutting-edge future digital technology interactions. Justin Edwards is a PhD candidate at the University of Dublin and a member of the ADAPT Centre. His research examines speech in multitasking environments, examining how people speak to machines when busily conducting other tasks, and applying these insights to design of system-initiated dialogue with conversational agents. His work has been presented at CHI, CUI, and Mobile HCI, and published in Interacting with Computers. He also hosts a podcast about computational creativity called Robots on Typewriters, which work on this topic being published twice at the CUI conference. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Justin and Ben for today's presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right. So let me just get the slides started for you there. Thanks very much for the introduction there, Colin. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending the talk today. Myself and Justin are really, really thankful to be here, and we're really excited to hear your questions and your thoughts about something that we've been working on for must be about 2.5 years now, across different projects, and so it's really interesting to see what your views will be, and what you think about the work. So today we're talking about some work that we've been doing, looking at how we make agents a bit more proactive. when they're interacting with users. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about the challenges that research faces, in particular the focus of, and Justin's going to focus on his research work in this area about where some of the major challenges we feel are in terms of looking at how we make voice assistants, as they are at the moment, be more proactive and be more engaging and be more collaborative with users. So so just a little bit about us. So Justin, I don't know if you want to go first there.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and thanks, Carl, for that great introduction. I'll keep it brief as you've already heard a lot of this, but I'm Justin Edwards. I'm a third-year PhD candidate at University College Dublin, and I'm researching how proactive agents should be designed. And my research is funded by the SFI Adapt Center. Before coming to UCD, I received a bachelor's degree in cognitive science from Williams College in America, and I spent some time at University College London researching multitasking and interruptions in human-computer interaction.
And so you've heard a bit about my background as well. So I was recently promoted. I was promoted last week to associate professor. So when I sent in the sent in the biography to Carl, that hadn't quite come through. So I'm now associate professor at University College Dublin, and importantly, I'm a funded investigator in the SFI Adapt Centre, which is a world leading research centre, bringing in universities from across the country to research digital engagement and future digital interactions, with one strand of this being speech and language technologies, which I'll be talking about a little bit more obviously today. My background is in speech interface interaction. I'm kind of obsessed with dialogue and understanding how that works, and how that works with machines as well as people, and learning from one and the other. So I also have a background in cognitive and experimental psychology and psycholinguistics, and a real kind of passion for human-computer interaction, understanding how the human can be taken into consideration when designing any technology, but in particular, my fascination is around speech and language technologies. So, we start off today. I'm going to pass you over to Justin to tell us a bit more about voice assistants at the moment.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today? So what are voice assistants? Voice assistants are the things kind of in our everyday lives and a lot of our different devices, things like Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, Cortana. They're embedded into everything from our phone to our computer to our microwave and our fridge these days. In fact, in 2019, Microsoft found that 72% of respondents that they interviewed had used a voice assistant before, and they estimated that 75% of US households had at least one smart speaker, these little devices like the Amazon Alexa, the Echo Dot. And they found that Amazon Alexa users in particular, but voice agent users across the spectrum really use these things a lot, that among Alexa users issue 18.2 commands per day to their voice assistant. And it's not just that these things are in our devices all around us all day, but we're actually using them a lot too. Approximately 2/3 of the commands that we issue to our voice assistants are used for one of three functions. Those functions are doing simple web searches, like looking up a quick fact. Another function is controlling music, so using this smart speaker to play some music while you're cooking or driving around. Finally, the real growing use for these is Internet of Things devices, things like your smart camera at your door or the lights in your bedroom, things you can control around the house using voice. In fact, a recent research and markets report found that 172.6 million smart home devices were installed in North America in 2019 alone. So hundreds of millions of these devices being installed each year now. They estimated that by 2024, 101 million smart homes would be in operation in Europe. So they're ubiquitous, they're all around us, and they're only growing. So not only are they ubiquitous, but we actually use voice assistants differently than we use our visual interfaces like our phones or our laptops. There was a 2018 paper by our colleague Martin Porcheron at the University of Nottingham's Mixed Reality Lab that recognized this. The paper was called Voice Interfaces in Everyday Life, and it looked at the way that voice agents are embedded into our daily routines. This work looked at households like the household pictured here, where there were multiple family members and a smart speaker placed in a high traffic area, so a place like a living room or a kitchen. And they found that voice agent interactions are quite different than how we use our phone, our laptop, our tablet. They involve multiple people speaking to each other, to the agent, integrating their questions and commands directly into the dialogue that they're having with their family members. That the voice agent in this way becomes kind of another dialogue partner, becomes another partner that has its turn in the spotlight, that gets spoken to and has its chance to speak. That the role of user bounces around. It's not just me holding my phone in front of me, I'm using the phone and no one else in the room is. Everyone in the room is simultaneously part of this conversation with the device. And likewise, the role of who gets to speak bounces around the room as well. This is kind of the aspirational view of how people are trying to use these things now, but it doesn't always work quite so well.
So one of the issues here as well, to some extent, is the fact that these systems are currently not conversational as we would see in terms of a kind of a dialogue or communicative set of structures. You see in the previous slides, there's a family trying to engage with the system. They are the ones initiating that conversation as users and giving particular requests as well. But they don't necessarily get a huge amount back from the system. So not only are people jostling for being able to control aspects of the system, they may also just be getting one or two turn dialogues to interact with that system. So prime example here would be, for instance, if you were trying to set an alarm or you were trying to set a reminder using your Amazon Echo, you might say, well, I don't want to say it actually just now, just in case it sets off your Echoes if you have them in the house. But you may ask it to set a reminder, give it some information, and you may get a confirmation statement from the device. So it might just say, okay, that's saved for you. Or you may get nothing. You may get a flash of the ring at the bottom or a flash of the ring at the top of the device. Or for instance, if it's using a mobile phone, you might get different feedback on your screen, depending on telling you that the function has been conducted. Now, nevertheless, though, in this case, what's happening is that firstly, it's a task-oriented dialogue. What people are focusing on here is to get the system to do something for it, rather than speaking to it like another conversational actor, as a social conversational actor in the interaction. And secondly, the device is waiting for you to say something. It's waiting for you to give it the command that it will do something in particular. Now, that is really useful if you have something that is able that you want the system to do, and you have that query in your head. It's not so great though if the agent has something to tell you, or if it wants to try and engage you in interaction. So this is the reason why sometimes you see a lot of people owning these devices, but they don't, as Justin highlighted, they use them, but they could potentially use them much more. They could be much more useful if we maybe move towards more of a kind of a sense of a more human-like form of interaction, an element that we see in science fiction, where we have conversational systems that engage with us, that are proactively asking us questions or proactively giving us information and helping us in the way to create a task, or to help us solve particular problems that we have. So an example here would be, for instance, in the movie Her, where Theodore Twombly falls in love with his voice assistant. I hope I'm not wrecking the ending for anyone there. So it's a great film. I would advise that you do watch it. And in the film, we see that the agent isn't just necessarily waiting for Theodore's statements. The agent, which is played by Scarlett Johansson, also suggests particular options or suggests particular things for Theodore to do, talks to Theodore, as well as talks with him, rather than waiting for particular commands. Now, we did some recent research here looking at try to see how people look at this type of interaction. And we found that, interestingly, people have, because of potentially the way that these systems are already designed and ingrained into the way that we interact, people see these devices, these agents, as task executors. They see them, they find it very hard to see them as something that could collaborate with them. And how we build that. How we build that agent is a real challenge for the future, but it's one of those things that needs to occur if we're going to move speech agents into a different form of interaction, or a more future form of interaction that allows them to become a much more holistic modality for interaction.
So conversation is multi-directional. It's intelligent. Anyone can talk at any time. When we're talking to another person, we read each other's intentions. We are basically reading each other's minds. We're anticipating what our dialogue partner's saying, what they're going to say, when their turn's going to be over, whether it's going to be our turn to speak, and what we need to say. We leave only a few hundred milliseconds between the end of what the last person says and the beginning of what the next person says, coordinating our conversation nearly perfectly. And agents don't do this. They don't anticipate when it's their turn to speak. They don't jump in when they have just the right thing to say. And it's not because our agents, our devices, don't know about the world. It's not even that they don't know about us. They have lots of information at their disposal, the entire internet and all the personal data we're giving them. It's not that they don't have enough information. It's that our technology fundamentally is not conversational, and it's not focused on the context of the information around them.
And so what might the future hold if we do try and make these systems a bit more conversational? So a bit more that they engage with the user rather than waiting for the user to say something specifically for them to do. What might this look like? And what are the challenges that we might face whenever trying to design this? And now we focus in particular, because of being in an HCI lab and an HCI research center, on the user-centered challenges here. So there are no doubt many technical challenges that are involved in this. What we're going to highlight in the next part of the talk here is really about the idea of what the challenges are to the interaction from a user perspective. So from this sense of how can we get this engaged interaction, this that where the system is engaging with the user, the system is asking the user particular things, and is much more proactive in its interaction. So the future at the moment, so the present is very static. It's almost very user-led, but the future could be very, very different in terms of it being much more collaborative with these agents, moving from intelligent assistants to intelligent collaborators.
That's right. Our devices are powerful. They're just not conversational. We have an understanding of how conversation works so well. We understand how we coordinate this with humans. But we think the next challenge is being able to coordinate this with machines and having our machines coordinate conversation. The interfaces we use are the gateways between ourselves and the wealth of knowledge underneath them, the entire internet, or the specialized knowledge that these assistants have. If we can make our voice assistants more like voice collaborators, if we can make these interactions more conversational, technology becomes more valuable to us. We believe that proactive agents that are truly conversational help move us towards this future.
So firstly, let's think about where these might appear. So these agents that have been very popular over at present are mostly based in the home, or they're based on our phones, and sort of so they're mobile by default. But where might we see these agents being used if they become more proactive? So an example here would be that if you're in a meeting, for instance, and your agent has a piece of information for you, or has a piece of information that is beneficial to the group that's discussing a particular issue at the meeting, it may then want to proactively engage the group by stating a particular piece of information, or giving you a piece of information that might be crucial to the decision that you're about to make in that particular meeting. So this could be done by using an Amazon Echo like this, for instance, on on a desk in a meeting. It could also be used by using a number of devices, such as like the kind of Bose glasses, where you can actually have the agent within your ear rather than just for everyone else to hear. So you could also see personal proactive agents where you're in a meeting and this agent is giving you pieces of information that you may be able to relay to the team that are useful to the decisions that are being made. So that's one particular context where these could have real use in terms of giving you a piece of information that is really pertinent to the situation that the agent and yourself are in, and to be collaborating on a particular decision. And so there are, of course, other different types of scenarios and contexts where that might be appropriate and able to be used as well.
Yeah, another area of interest for us that we think is a really important context for voice assistance is in the car, in vehicle, that again and again, these user studies come out. A somewhat famous one was run by Microsoft, asking people how they use their voice assistants and how they'd like to use their voice assistants. And again, what we end up hearing is that people think that driving is just the perfect opportunity to use these things, that they say, using voice is so much more useful to me when my eyes are busy and when my hands are busy, when I can't interact with my other devices, but I can still get something done. I can still multitask and accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, even while I'm driving. People say that they also would like to help transform their commute into more of a virtual office. This is especially true as automated vehicles are on the horizon, and the idea of the car, the commute as your mobile office really looks like a frontier for the future of work. But this can only be achieved safely and effectively if our cars can communicate with us as readily as we can communicate with each other. Now, one place we've seen a little bit of this starting to come to fruition is the BMW Hey Bmw Assistant. This is their voice agent that's integrated directly into vehicles now. These assistants can control things like your climate control, your navigation system, your entertainment system, all from the same interface, the same voice agent that can do sort of the other things, the set a timer, look up a fact on the web. But importantly, this agent is proactive. It's embraced the first steps of proactivity anyway, that the vehicle can alert the driver when car status changes, when things like your tire pressure are low, or if your destination, if your route's changed and now you don't have enough fuel to make it to your destination. Importantly, it's not that the car is just interrupting constantly with the sorts of push notifications you get on your phone. The agent is more conversational than that, in that it keeps context in mind. Proactive interactions are about the drive and about the vehicle, things that are relevant to the driver in the moment. And this is part of what we mean by making the interactions more conversational. Now, agents are just an interface. They're just the tip of the iceberg that let us interact with the rest of the data that lies below that interface, below that surface. Products like IBM Watson are demonstrating how that information beneath the surface can be general. It can be like when you ask Alexa or Siri a question and you're essentially Googling it with your voice, or they can be a lot more specific. So IBM Watson has started integrating into places like doctors' offices, law offices, offices across a number of sectors to let people access professional databases, kind of personal databases, specific information. That way, the agent we're interacting with, and instead of being the generalist that we have in our home, be an expert in our workplace. That way we can tailor our conversation, we can tailor our interaction towards a shared context. We understand that what I'm asking about is the internal company documents and not just anything you could find off the web. This way we can communicate with our agents without fear of ambiguity or misunderstanding. Proactivity and sensitivity to context are what we're talking about when we're talking about making agents more conversational. So how do we get there? What are the major challenges to making our agents more proactive, more conversational, more helpful and useful? We identify a few for you right now. First question I'm looking at right now in my own research is when to initiate. So for one, if an agent is going to initiate an interaction with a user to speak to a person who might already be engaged in some other task, when should the agent do so? How can it tell? Some early work on proactive AI from Eric Horowitz at Microsoft stipulated that agents should seek to minimize the cost of poor timing. This calls for agents to be aware of both how disruptive their initiation is going to be and how costly a disruption could be to the task that someone's already engaged in. So maybe that task that someone's already engaged in is talking to other people. Maybe we're imagining that boardroom setting from earlier. In that case, our agents will need to engage in the sort of turn-taking mind reading that we mentioned earlier, understanding the conversational cues that people are giving off, and determining when it might be appropriate to take the floor themselves. Other tasks are fairly easy to find a good moment to interrupt. There's been some work by our colleague Chris Jansen at the University of Utrecht, among others, that's looked into the idea of natural breakpoints, these tiny moments in between tasks or in between parts of tasks that are better suited for an interruption and for a new task. So if a person was engaged in, say, writing an email, it might be better to interrupt that person at the end of a paragraph or at the end of a sentence rather than right in the middle of a paragraph or right in the middle of a sentence. Not all tasks are that easy to model, however. That said, some of this work is being done. Some work at KAIST, the Institute for Science and Technology in Korea, recently published a paper exploring potential moments for proactive agents to begin interactions with people who are going about their daily lives in the home. They found that cues like people's mood, their location in the home, presence of other people, the time of day, all sorts of cues like this provide useful parameters that can help an agent make a prediction about whether the person that is their user, that is their owner, whether that person is available. Sensors like cameras on a smart speaker device or vehicle sensors in the car can help give the agent more cues, more context to pick a good moment to minimize the cost of initiating an interaction. Now, once an agent picks that moment, once it knows what it wants to say and when it wants to say it, it's time to initiate that interaction. But how should that be done? There's been some work in the past on intelligent agents by McFarlane and colleagues in the US that discuss the idea of negotiated interruptions. These are interactions that are initiated in a way that a person can defer. This might be done through speech, like asking, "Is now a good time to talk?" Or it could be done through any number of other signals, other forewarnings like tone, change in the light on maybe your Echo device, even a gesture or eye contact if an agent has a body. This idea of using a cue to signal I want to speak is something we humans do already. This is something I've been looking at myself, the idea of access rituals, these behaviors that we engage in when we want to begin an interaction with another person. Things like saying, "Hey," or "Excuse me," or clearing your throat, or tapping someone on the shoulder. Depending on the device that an agent's embedded in, an agent could use access rituals like these too, clearly signaling an intent to speak, but doing so in a way that doesn't immediately steal the floor away from another person or another task. Now, maybe our proactive agents will have their own sets of access rituals that aren't exactly like the ones we use with each other, but this idea of access rituals gives us a nice starting point for understanding how interactions can be smoothly requested for people to accept or reject or ignore and facilitate a more conversational interaction. On the next slide, I have an image of a device that gives us a really good idea of what these access rituals might look like from an agent. This is the discontinued social robot Jibo that could use body language, eye contact, basic facial expressions, and speech, all different ways to signal to a person, "I want to talk to you right now." I think this gives us a nice imagination of what our future agents, the sorts of things they might harness to do just the same thing.
So we also need to consider when these agents are producing utterances to initiate and to engage with us, why they are doing so. So there's an element in Justin's work looking at the idea of kind of importance of the statement and urgency of the information that's being requested. And this is an important consideration to take on board whenever we're looking to design and devise these types of systems. Does the information that's going to be delivered by the system to the user at that particular moment when the agent's being proactive, or does that request that's being delivered by the agent really need to happen then, or can it happen at a particular moment? And this may depend on, again, as we said, the urgency of the information that the agent is going to give to the user. So for instance, if there's an urgent report that has been delivered to your email and you're in a meeting and you need to know about that report because you're discussing that topic at that moment in the interaction, the meeting, then your agent may need to give you that piece of information, that heads up that report has just arrived, and that therefore that might change the entire conversation that you're having within that meeting, and it might change the decisions that you make. And that agent is making a very specific decision to interrupt what you're doing and override some of the other cues in the meeting to be able to make that intervention. Of course, we do this with in speech all the time. If we have some urgent information, we might use it through body language and through cues, as Justin was saying before, trying to highlight when we can get access to the floor or access to the conversation. But it may be that the type of information means that floor access, what happens in a conversation when someone starts to speak, is prioritized for the agent to give information to the people they're collaborating with. And so that might take a different type of shape when you're designing the intervention, or when you're designing how the system does this, compared to non-urgent information, compared to something that can wait till the end of the meeting. It also might have different types of design cues to highlight the urgency as well. So you can see the voice being sort of slightly faster and slightly more urgent in terms of the emotions within the synthesized voice used for an agent for urgent information compared to non-urgent information. So when you think about this with a proactive voice agent, the design of that agent can be really flexible in terms of the way of initiating, but we need to be understanding about what users want the agent to interrupt them with and to initiate with. We don't want to end up in the situation where we develop a voice-based Clippy. Right, so for all that Clippy was useful, sometimes it would sometimes pop up for no reason at all, and would try and almost kind of take over the task that you wanted to conduct. So by being sensitive to what users want the agent to be able to be proactive with, when they want to engage, and what type of tasks they would like to engage, and what type of information they may want to interrupt the user with, we can get a better sense and a better design for these types of proactive types of interaction. There's also a sense here as well about how the system will work. So some of you who are familiar with voice assistants might be thinking, right, well, okay, for this to work, you may have to have the system to be always on. And this is what happens with voice systems most of the time just now, where we're waiting for a wake word for the agent to start up and to engage and to interact with the user. So in this case, this is a major issue if you're thinking about proactive agents or proactive voice agents, where, you know, when does do we have a kind of a set situation where the agent is recording the entire meeting and identifies, and that data is being sort of recognized, and the point of interruption is identified from that. Do we need to, or do we do something else? Do we kind of have a permission-based system where the agent is turned on at the start of a meeting and everyone agrees for the agent to take that role? And so everyone knows that the agent is listening to the conversation and is able to take part. Also, potentially, what happens to that recording? What happens to that data from that interaction? These are things that need to be worked through and worked on whenever we're developing this type of interaction. And this is also something to do with the legal framework that these operate in as well. So I know there was an Interruptions committee recently around this idea of privacy, data privacy around these types of voice agents, as they are just now. So in terms of being user-led. So we still need to reflect on the idea of what privacy privacy would look like, or what's kind of data privacy and data rights would look like in these types of interfaces and interactions. And that's something that we're looking at within the Adapt Center as well as we go forward with thinking about these aspects of proactive agency and proactive interaction. So to kind of sum up and conclude what we've been talking about today. So at the moment, these agents that we see, voice agents, are very almost static in terms of the way they interact with us. We have to engage with them through using wake words, and they're seen very much as task-based dialogue partners. People tend to ask it to do a very simple task, and then that's executed and the conversation then finishes in most instances. You may have a sort of short to and fro, but it's not really conversational, and it's not really very proactive and very kind of collaborative in the way that it's structured and conducted. But the future may be very different. It might be that these agents can engage with us to give us more information, to be more collaborative, and to help us with engaging with particular tasks and helping us as a collaborator. And as we've highlighted through the talk, there are a number of challenges to this as well. So there's how we initiate the interaction, the why we initiate the interaction, and when to do this, and when is it appropriate. And this work takes on, as you probably gathered through the talk, a user-centered flavor to it. We will not be able to identify these things. We will not be able to get these agents to work unless we identify from the user's perspective, from the people who are using this information in the meeting, for the people who are going to be using this information in the car, when it's appropriate to do so, how the agent should be interrupting them, and what it should be saying, and when it should be doing that. Without that, this type of system will not work. And so the reason why we're doing this work at the Adapt Center is we feel that it's fundamental to understand the user perspective in this type of system so that we can get this correct and get this working for agents to become collaborators of the future. And so if you want any more information on the work that we're doing, so we're on Twitter. There's also some work on the Adapt Center website that talks a bit more about what the Adapt Center is doing in terms of research, in terms of proactive agents and proactive agency. And we're also very happy for you to contact us via email. We're happy to share papers with you, share all the work that we've been doing, and hear about the work that you're doing in the area if you're interested in this area and the potential that you see in these types of agents and interactions. But without further ado, I think Justin and I are very happy to take questions and hear your comments. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.